All right, class, settle in. Today, we're diving into what I think is one of the most pivotal moments in 20th century philosophy. It's like a fork in the road, taken by a master and his most brilliant and rebellious student. And trust me, this is where phenomenology really starts to get interesting. So our story starts with two huge figures, Edmund Husserl and his star pupil, a young man named Martin Heidegger. Now, what's so important to get is that they both began from the exact same revolutionary place. They shared this incredible, ambitious mission. And that mission was summed up in Husserl's famous motto, his call to arms for all of philosophy, really, to the things themselves. What did he mean by that? Well, he wanted to sweep away centuries of abstract speculation. His whole idea was, let's study conscious experience directly, exactly as it's given to us, before we start layering on all our theories and preconceived notions. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. It's all about how they interpreted that shared goal. Because even though they started together, their different approaches would lead to one of the most significant, seismic splits in modern thought. So to really understand Heidegger's radical departure, we first need to get a solid grip on Husserl's path. We've got to see where he was coming from. Okay, so Husserl's path, the view from within. To get what Heidegger was reacting against, we have to understand Husserl's method. You see, for Husserl, the journey to find absolute certainty wasn't about looking out at the world. It was a journey inward, a really meticulous, careful process designed to find a totally unshakable starting point for all knowledge. So Husserl's big question was this: how can we possibly study consciousness without all the biases of the natural world getting in the way? I mean, think about it. The biggest problem he saw was that our everyday assumptions, especially that casual, almost unconscious belief that the world just exists out there completely independent of us, that belief actually clouds our vision. It contaminates the data, so to speak. So to solve this, he developed this absolutely brilliant, though I'll admit very difficult, three-step method called the phenomenological reduction. Step one is what he calls the natural attitude. This is just how we normally live. We go about our day assuming the world and all the stuff in it exists. Simple enough, right? But then comes step two, the epoché. And this is a really radical move. We have to bracket our belief in the existence of the external world. Now, this is crucial. You're not denying it exists. You're just putting that whole question aside. You're hitting the pause button on it. And that leads to step three, the reduction. Once you've bracketed the world, what's left? What can you be absolutely certain of? Only the field of pure consciousness and its experiences. And this leads us to his ultimate destination. This is the payoff for all that hard work of bracketing. After you nullify the world, what is the residue? What's left over? For Husserl, it's what he calls the transcendental ego. This is the sphere of pure consciousness that remains, a pure, worldless subject, an absolute consciousness that he believed was the rock-solid, ultimate foundation for how we make sense of anything. All right, so that's Husserl's project. Now let's turn to Heidegger's detour. Because for Heidegger, that very first step Husserl took, that heroic, brilliant attempt to detach from the world to find certainty, was actually a critical and ultimately a completely misleading mistake. He basically thought his old teacher took a wrong turn right at the very beginning of the journey. And this is the crucial point, so lean in for this one. Heidegger didn't just try to answer Husserl's question differently. Husserl's question was, how does a pure, isolated consciousness connect to an external world? Heidegger looked at that and asked a counter-question. Wait a minute, why are we assuming they're separate in the first place? He completely reframed the problem. He argued that the very idea of starting with a consciousness separate from the world, that was the original error. The whole question was just flawed from the get-go. And his reasoning is laid out right here in this quote. He says, a mere subject without a world is not initially and is also never given. What he's saying is that this idea of a pure ego just floating around in a vacuum, well, it's a philosopher's fantasy, it's an interesting thought experiment, a useful abstraction maybe, but it's not something we ever actually experience. Our existence, human existence, is just never, ever found that way. Okay, so Heidegger's path, the view from here. If Husserl's path was this journey inward, away from the world, what was Heidegger's alternative? Well, he proposed a radically different starting point. Not from some detached, floating, theoretical I, but from right here, from our concrete, messy, boots-on-the-ground everyday existence. And to really hammer this home, he famously threw out Husserl's term consciousness and replaced it with his own very specific term, Dasein. Now, it literally translates to being there, and he chose that word for a reason. He wanted to bake the idea right into the terminology that we are always, already located in, involved with, and actively dealing with a world. It's not an optional extra. So this central concept of his, being in the world, is a unitary phenomenon. It's really important to understand this isn't a spatial relationship. It's not like a t-shirt in a closet, where one object is simply inside another. No. For Heidegger, it's a fundamental state of involvement, of familiarity, of engagement. We don't first exist as a self and then decide to form a connection to the world. As he puts it, self and world belong together in the single entity, the Dasein. They are two sides of the very same coin. You can't have one without the other. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. Some of you are skeptical, and that's good. You're thinking, okay, professor, this is interesting, but isn't this just subjective description? Where's the science in all this? And that's a fair question, but Heidegger's argument would be that this approach is actually more grounded in reality than Husserl's abstract ego. He's not trying to be less scientific. He's arguing that this is a more accurate description of our primary lived experience. And once you accept this new starting point, this focus on Dasein, it reveals something really cool. Two fundamentally different ways we encounter things in our world. We go from theory versus practical life. And this distinction, I think, is what makes Heidegger's philosophy so concrete and actually pretty easy to grasp once you see it. Okay, so the first way, our primary way of encountering things, he calls readiness to hand, or Zuhandenheit in German. This is our normal, everyday, practical mode. Think about it. When I pick up a hammer to hang a picture, I'm not thinking, an object with a wooden handle and a metal head weighing approximately 1 pound. No, I don't think about its properties at all. I just use it. The hammer basically disappears into the action of hammering. But what happens if, as I'm swinging, the head of the hammer flies off and smacks the wall? Suddenly, the activity stops dead. The tool's broken. And it's only in that moment of breakdown that the hammer becomes an object of detached study. Now I'm looking at it, I'm staring at it. It's no longer part of my action, it's just a thing, lying there. This, Heidegger calls presence at hand, Vorhandenheit. Do you see the massive reversal here? It's absolutely profound. Husserl's entire focus, his starting point, is the theoretical attitude. He begins with the world as a collection of objects, presence at hand. But Heidegger's focus is the complete opposite. He starts with practical engagement. For him, the world is primarily a context of equipment, readiness to hand. That detached theoretical view that Husserl treats as primary is, for Heidegger, actually secondary. It's something that only happens when things go wrong. So when we get to the destination, we see two totally different worlds. These two paths, Husserl's and Heidegger's, they don't just lead to different philosophical methods. That's just the surface. They reveal entirely different conceptions of what philosophy is even for, and ultimately, what it means to be a human being. So what we see is this major philosophical shift. On one hand, you have Husserl's transcendental phenomenology. Its focus on pure, timeless consciousness, totally removed from the everyday world. But on the other hand, Heidegger's path leads to what we now call existential phenomenology. And its focus couldn't be more different. It's all about our concrete, historical, lived-in existence, the messy reality of it all. Okay, this table here is a great way to sum up the key differences we've talked about today. It really lays out that profound shift. For Husserl, the starting point is the transcendental ego. For Heidegger, it's Dasein. Husserl's method is the epoche. Heidegger's is the existential analytic. Husserl's primary relation to the world is theoretical. Heidegger's is practical. And their goals? Husserl wanted that rock-solid foundation in consciousness. Heidegger, he was after something even bigger, an understanding of the meaning of being itself. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? What should you write down in your notes? It's this. Heidegger fundamentally argued that philosophy itself has to start from a different place. Not from some idealized, detached observer in an ivory tower, but from our messy, practical, everyday involvement in the world. He challenged the entire Western tradition that says to understand reality, you must first step outside of it. Heidegger's big point is you can't. That's impossible. We have to start from within our situation. And this leaves us with a really provocative final question. A question that challenges not just Husserl, but maybe the entire foundation of Western thought going all the way back to Plato. If our understanding is always shaped by our being in the world,
then can we ever truly achieve a completely objective perspective? Is a view from nowhere even possible? I want you to think about that as you leave today. It's a huge question, and it's where we'll pick things up next time.
Thanks, everyone.